Recorded audio journal, Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 2nd, 2043. Rain day 3421. I almost didn't record today. I told myself I wouldn't bother anymore. What's the point of documenting the same sound over and over again? But something's different today. Not louder, not heavier, just quieter, as if something behind the rain stopped. The rain began as an anomaly, a pattern dismissed by nearly every meteorological institution. A slow shift in zonal jet streams, slightly higher ocean evaporation rates, a weak El Niño that never reverted. For the first year, people just called it the long wet. By year 3, it was a headline. By year 6, it was the only headline. Now we live in it, dwell in it, drink it, grow what little food remains in it. The rain has become our medium, our climate, our clock. But there's a sound under it, or there was. That's why I'm recording today. Not because I heard something, but because I didn't. In my lab, Station Delta 3 at the Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, we monitor infrasound patterns. They're usually background noise, tectonic chatter, glacial moans, stratospheric turbulence. But since the rain started, there's been this consistent undertone, a hum. It sits at 18.2 Hz, just below human perception, constant, for nearly 9 years. Until today. Today the hum dropped out. That might not sound like much, but understand. For nearly a decade, it was our planet's new heartbeat. We thought it was just acoustic pressure from sustained low-altitude rain density, maybe interaction between cloud layers and weakened jet streams. But now that it's gone, I feel something else entirely. I feel like we've lost the signal. Or worse, that the signal stopped because it was done sending. Every surface here is slick now, not just wet, saturated. Even stainless steel rusts in this kind of prolonged humidity. We coat everything with polymer hydrophobics, but they only last a month before failure. The mold finds its way in eventually, through seals, through skin. We rotate through 3 sets of boots a week. We've adapted in strange ways. We now grow low-light crops in floating greenhouse barges over hydrothermal pockets. They use a synthetic canopy membrane to collect photonic scatter. We don't call them plants anymore. They're nutrient architecture. They taste like nothing. Humans live in vertical arcologies now. Shelter towers, they call them. Entire cities inside single spires, built atop mountain ridges and plateaus that once housed only radar domes or early warning systems. The ground is no longer stable in most places. Soil has become paste. Entire regions are what we call hydraulic dead zones, where water pressure from below now equals atmospheric pressure above. You don't walk in those zones. You sink and never stop. The UNRWC, United Nations Rainfall War Council, yes, that's real, has issued 7 adaptation decrees in the last 2 years. None of them address the cause. I believe the cause is solar. Not solar in the way most people think, not flares, not sunspots. It's deeper than that. There's been a drift in the sun's radiative symmetry. Slight, yes, but when magnified through the lens of a weakened geomagnetic field, the effects are profound. Our magnetosphere used to shield us like a tide break. Now it's perforated, and the ionospheric composition has changed. The K-index used to spike during coronal mass ejections. Now it hums steadily at 4, not enough to raise alarms, but never falling, as if the Earth is stuck in a state of perpetual geomagnetic tension. Rain is the symptom. The hum was the language. And now, there's only the silence. I haven't told the others. My staff assumes it's equipment failure. One of the interns even rebooted the acoustic monitoring systems. But I watched the logs before they cleared. The dip was real. The hum stopped at 4:17 a.m., precisely, synchronized across every channel, like a conductor dropped the baton. I've uploaded the raw acoustic profile to our backup server. Encrypted, of course. If anything happens to me, I want someone, anyone, to know there was a pattern and that it ended. I'll continue logging each day. Maybe it'll return. Maybe we've just entered a new phase, or maybe whatever was listening no longer needs to. Recorded audio journal, Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 5, 2043. Sunrise used to mean something. Even at the poles, even in the bleakest months, you'd get a sliver of light, a brief arc that reminded you, Earth is turning, life continues, energy flows. But now, there is no sunrise. There is only the sky getting slightly less dark. Rain clouds have sealed the Earth in a global vapor shell. Atmo-transmittance surveys now confirm that less than 4.6% of direct solar irradiance reaches ground level anywhere on the planet. In many areas, especially coastal flood zones and tropical basins, it's closer to 1%. We live in a world wrapped in wet wool, and it's starving the light. The chlorophyll crisis began during year 2 of the rainfall, when crops began yellowing despite adequate water. Entire nations retooled their agriculture budgets for emergency photosynthetic enhancement programs. At first, we tried amplified light towers, essentially industrial-scale sun lamps scattered across croplands. The failure was immediate. The rain refracted and diffused the beams into useless glows. It was like trying to sunbathe under wax paper. Then came the second approach, spectral redirection. Researchers at the New Kyoto Biophotonics Institute developed a system of quantum membrane greenhouses, domes constructed with layered nanofilms capable of capturing low-frequency ambient light and re-radiating it as higher energy wavelengths. These structures essentially recolored the drizzle. A dull gray rain could be transformed into scattered red and blue bands, perfect for synthetic chloroplasts. We call them aurora domes. They work, to a degree, but they're expensive, fragile, and they require stable terrain, which is rare now. Of the 22 built in the first deployment wave, 9 have already collapsed under saturation weight or subsurface liquefaction. Outside the domes, nothing green survives in the wild anymore. The global vegetation index has plummeted by 62% since rain year 1. Natural forests are dissolving into rot. Lichens dominate now. Fungal carpets. Entire swaths of Europe's deciduous biomes have been reduced to spore-dense silos of gray-black fiber where once maple groves stood. You can't walk there without a respirator. The air is soft with decay. We've had to rewrite the rules of farming. In our lab's vertical stack garden, we no longer use plants in the traditional sense. Our crops are genetically engineered hybrids, spliced with extremophile algae, bioluminescent coral code, and trace elements of old-growth ferns. They don't bloom, they don't seed, but they eat rain and glow in the dark. We harvest them with sonic cutters, not shears. We've eliminated the sun from the agricultural equation. This should terrify you. There's also a cultural shift, a spiritual one. I've noticed people talking about the before light as if it's mythology. In news broadcasts, you'll hear phrases like, back when the sun watched over us, or in the days of clear sky. Sunlight has become a kind of folklore. Even the children, those born post-event, don't draw yellow suns anymore. They draw puddles, or circles with eyes, or clouds with antennae. There is a global dissociation occurring. We're losing our shared sky. Technically, we're adapting, but ecologically, we're collapsing. With less sunlight, Earth's carbon sequestration has tanked. Algal blooms have dropped off in the Pacific Current. Plankton populations are down 40%, and with them, marine respiration. Rain doesn't just drown soil anymore, it robs it of memory. The Earth forgets how to breathe. I've been reviewing ancient solar cycles. Maunder minimum, Dalton minimum. The patterns are shallow compared to now. This isn't just less sunlight, it's a muted spectrum. The sun hasn't stopped, it's just lost its resonance. We can measure the energy flux, but the harmonic structure has shifted. It's like someone changed the tuning fork of the cosmos. There are whispers that solar observatories in Antarctica are seeing signs of photonic refraction off something not visible. That light is bouncing back from somewhere it shouldn't. That maybe we're no longer under a simple cloud system, but rather a shell, a dome, a screen. I don't know what I believe yet, but I do know this. Photosynthesis, as we knew it, is dead. We have replaced it with calculated artificial hunger, and even that might not be enough. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 10th, 2043. I woke this morning to silence again, that same eerie lack of resonance I logged last week. But this time I heard something new, something faint, not from the rain, from above it. A low mechanical groan, like turbines shifting through fog. It passed overhead in the dark. I think it was one of them, one of the sky cities. We've stopped trying to hold the ground. By year 5 of the reign, more than 800 cities were labeled permanent submersion zones. Jakarta, Dhaka, Lagos, and New Orleans were among the first to vanish, not in tsunamis, but by attrition. The water simply stopped draining. Aquifers rose, river deltas overflowed in slow pulses, and the soil turned to gel. Concrete cracked under the weight of its own wetness. Roads became rivers, then became reefs. At first, humanity retreated inland and upward, abandoning coasts, fortifying highlands. But eventually, even the mountains became sponges. The earth was no longer trustworthy. So we turned to the sky. The first prototypes of aerostatic megastructures were launched by the Pan-Pacific Atmospheric Alliance, a joint initiative between remnants of Japan, California, and Southeast Asia. The concept was simple, but the execution was a miracle of desperation. Use a hybrid of helium frame lifts, solar pulse rotors, and dynamic weather routing to suspend habitable platforms above the persistent cloud layer, anywhere from 4 to 8 kilometers up. They called them refuge arcs. The press called them cloud cities. Their inhabitants simply call them home. They drift slowly with the jet stream, like aerial glaciers. Modular, self-contained. Each city consists of clustered aeropods, biodomes, power cores, water condensers, and fusion algae tanks, all networked through carbon-anchored tethers. Most of the lift is passive, massive low-density skeletal shells filled with adaptive gas mixtures that adjust buoyancy based on air pressure and humidity. They are both a marvel and a tragedy. They represent what we had to do to survive. I was aboard. Refuge Arc 7. Vapora. 2 years ago, when I briefed the Atmospheric Committee on spectral scatter readings. The air up there is thin, bright, and horrifyingly quiet. The rain ends just below their floors, leaving a mirror-like carpet of clouds stretching to every horizon. From above, Earth looks like a dead planet with a beating heart underneath. They have no soil, no rivers. Their water comes from condensation turbines. Their food is lab-grown from spliced yeasts and edible protein gels, stored in resin jars and flavored with psychosensory scent patches. Their music is silent frequencies played through bone resonance. No one speaks loudly in the clouds. The silence is sacred. Or maybe it's too easy to go mad up there. We call these cities refuges, but they're prisons too. There's no return to the surface. Too dangerous, too unstable, and too wet. Most residents are upward migrants, scientists, engineers, political elite, their families, and a new generation born in glass towers under false dawns. They never touch rain. Some of them, I think, don't believe it exists anymore. Technically, the cities are masterpieces. I've reviewed the schematics of Nimbus 12, the latest cloud tier arc. It utilizes magnetothermal venting from the upper troposphere to generate thrustless altitude control. Its fiber lattice hull bends with pressure pulses. Each power cell runs on a photonic reactor that captures even fractional light from cosmic microwave background radiation. We're scavenging the very edge of physics now to survive. But there's a psychological toll. A growing body of studies from sky-based psychologists reports dissociative altitude syndrome, a condition triggered by prolonged detachment from ground reference points. The body loses its sense of gravity, time becomes elastic, people forget how to orient themselves, some report dreams of falling into clouds that speak. The cost of refuge is reality. I watched the arc pass overhead this morning, barely a silhouette, just a long humming shadow, framed against a soft glow behind the clouds. I could feel it in my chest more than hear it. It reminded me of something I can't quite place. Maybe the old stories of Noah, or the floating islands in ancient myth. Or maybe it's just that deep down, we've always known the sky could take us back, but only if we let go of everything below. The rain continues, and the cities drift further out of sight. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 13th, 2043. We used to classify Earth's life into three broad kingdoms: animal, plant, and fungi. But that trinity is broken now. The plants are fading, the animals are dying, and the fungi are listening. I saw it first in the greenhouse rot. Back in year 4 of the rain, when our synthetic chloroplast system started to fail due to spore infiltration, we assumed it was a containment breach, standard mycotoxin event. But the rate of spread, the complexity of the fruiting bodies, and the intelligence of their structure, it was beyond anything in the known taxonomic catalogs. These weren't mushrooms, they were networks. They grew with purpose. They avoided surfaces we sprayed. They migrated toward heat, toward electricity, toward sound. At first we tried chemical fungicides, then genetic inhibitors, then spectral disruption. But by the time our countermeasures were deployed, they had already reclassified. This is no longer a war against infection. It's an ecological handoff. Let me explain. In normal ecosystems, fungi serve as decomposers. They digest the dead. They return life to its elemental components. But in the rain age, everything is becoming dead matter, saturated, anaerobic, soft. The fungi are thriving not just on decay, but through it. They're metabolizing the entire carbon chain of collapse, and they're not doing it passively. We've identified fungal species that now express electrogenic properties, emitting weak bioelectric signals through their mycelial networks. When we implanted acoustic sensors in a flooded cedar basin south of Oslo, we recorded pattern pulses at intervals consistent with primitive memory loops. Spore clusters in the air echoed these pulses using bioresonant humidity fluctuations. In simpler terms, the forest was speaking through steam. This is no longer just growth, it's emergence. On a macro level, the fungal overgrowths are replacing plant biomes entirely. What were once rainforests are now spore cathedrals, towering shelf fungi, bioluminescent gill fields, and canopy-wide mycelial veils that drip with chemical ooze. The air is thick with reproductive matter. Visibility drops to less than 10 meters in most dense zones. We now issue fungal density warnings the way we used to issue smog advisories. Breathing outdoors for more than an hour in these zones requires double-layered filters. The spores are small enough to bypass alveolar membranes. Some have been linked to neuropathic entrainment, a condition where prolonged exposure to fungal clouds creates strange repeating dreams, auditory hallucinations, and in rare cases, the belief that the fungi are reading your thoughts. It sounds insane. But I've interviewed 5 survivors from the drowned city of Sapporo, and each described hearing the same phrase in the mist. We remember the root. There is an unspoken theory forming in the darker corners of the scientific community, those of us who've stopped trusting institutional consensus. The theory is this: the fungi are not reacting to the rain. They are fulfilling a dormant program triggered by the new climate. When the sun dimmed and the magnetosphere thinned, the old biosphere began to recede, and with it, the balance of phototropic life. That left a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the original kingdom returned. It may not be intelligent in the way we are, but it is networked. It processes, it adapts, it builds memory into matter. And now, it's growing in patterns we can't ignore. Spirals, glyphs, neural branches, mandalas, designs that feel less like chance and more like architecture. We've begun classifying new zones as FMAs, fungal maturation areas. They're red-zoned, no drone flyovers, no human entry. Why? Because the fungi don't allow it. Last month, a survey drone over the Black Forest sent back a partial feed before signal loss. It showed massive fungal towers pulsing in rhythm with an unseen signal, then abruptly cut out. When recovered, the drone was found cocooned in dense hyphae. The onboard data log was overwritten, not corrupted. Overwritten. The file headers now read in a format resembling DNA base pair language. The fungi don't want to kill us. They want to replace us. Or worse, absorb us. And in a way, I understand. We paved over the earth. We ignited its sky, we drilled its bones, but the fungi waited, and the rain gave them their voice back. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 18, 2043. We used to measure migration in waves, in pulses of conflict, famine, flood, but this wasn't a wave. It was a silence, a withdrawal, a dissolving of population, like breath slowly leaving a body. No one talks about the rain belt anymore, not because it's dangerous, but because it's gone. The global climate models of the early 2030s predicted the intertropical convergence zone, the belt around Earth where trade winds converge and storms brew, would shift, wobble, intensify. But no one predicted it would become a trap. By year 7 of the rain age, the equatorial regions had become hydrological vacuums, zones of constant, inescapable saturation. Rainfall measured not in inches per month, but meters per week. Atmospheric rivers coiled around the globe, locked in place by new magnetohydrodynamic interference patterns caused by a misaligned heliomagnetic plane. The result: perpetual deluge across a band stretching from the Amazon basin through Central Africa, Indonesia, and the Indian subcontinent. The region became known as the Rain Belt, and then the drowning zone. Mass migration began quietly. Villages emptied, towns silenced. No panicked flight, just slow erosion. Entire communities vanished, one family at a time, walking north or south, following rumors of dryness that didn't exist. We found GPS tags in the mud where camps once stood, children's shoes lodged in fungal bark, journals soaked into pulp. They didn't die all at once, but they never reached anywhere. Infrastructure collapsed early, roads liquefied, bridges sagged into estuaries that weren't there the week before. Airports flooded, became lily-covered lakes. Communication towers rusted from the top down. The internet in these regions didn't go offline. It was drowned, eaten, and recycled by mold. The rain wasn't just a flood, it was erasure. I've reviewed drone footage from year 8 over what used to be Kinshasa, Manaus, and Bangkok. In each, no people, no intact structures above the canopy line. And in all 3, vast symmetrical spirals formed by abandoned belongings, as if placed there in some final act of intentionality. We don't understand them. Clothes, books, electronic parts, utensils, all arranged in slow-turning glyphs like rituals. We found similar formations in the Sudan corridor, abandoned satellite dishes pointing skyward, arranged like petals of some forgotten flower. Were they communicating, leaving messages for us, or someone else? Psychologically, the rain belt triggered a condition that's now officially classified as hydrotemporal displacement syndrome. Symptoms: dissolution of time perception, identity drift, memory layering, deep auditory hallucinations. Those who survived described hearing the future inside the rain, words that hadn't been spoken yet, voices of loved ones they hadn't met. Some would speak in loops. Others simply wandered into the water and sat down, eyes open, breathing deeply until they didn't. One of the few coherent reports came from an atmospheric data archivist stationed outside Jakarta. He transmitted this line before the feed was lost. The rain doesn't fall. It speaks. It's not landing. It's listening. We've yet to determine what that means. But the magnetometer readings in that region show unusual resonant absorption in the ELF, extremely low frequency band, suggesting some non-ionospheric reflector above the equator, as if something hung there, directing the storm. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. The equator is now a psychological event horizon. No one crosses it and comes back the same. Migration continues, but not in the way it used to. Now it's filtered, selected. Wealth moves by air, survival moves by raft. The rest just stop moving. We no longer map these places. The world has agreed, tacitly, to forget them. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 21, 2043. When the sky forgot the sun, we didn't just lose warmth or light. We lost direction, orientation, a center. The sun was our great constant. Its rising gave us faith in order, in time, in return. So when it was replaced by water, the mind demanded something new, and the rain became divine. This wasn't a return to old religions. The organized faiths, those built on calendars and cosmic repetition, began to fail during year 3 of the rain. Rituals tied to sunrise, lunar phase, and harvest no longer matched reality. The crops were lab-grown, the skies never cleared, even the moon, still there, still whole, was seldom visible through the atmosphere's suffocating opacity. In its place emerged something far stranger, something organic, localized, moist. We call them the rain-born faiths. The first documented example came from Cascadia, a cult known as the Order of the Perpetual Downpour. They were harmless at first, nomads in white veils, chanting into the mist, walking barefoot through flooded towns. But by year 6, they'd converted thousands. Their core belief? The sky is cleansing Earth of its memory. To resist is to trap the past. To drown is to be absolved. They practiced ritual submersion, floating in silence for hours at a time in flooded libraries, schools, old stadiums. It was not suicidal. It was devotional. They believed the rain carried encoded memory, each droplet a syllable in a sacred flood speech from a sky that could no longer speak in light. Other sects rose rapidly in isolated communities. The audience, in the remnants of East Texas, survivors of flash flood displacement, began meditating in storm-drained cathedrals. They believe that specific frequencies of rainfall unlock memory loops from ancestral DNA. Their temples are tuned to acoustics, raindrops falling through hollow metal spires, turning deluge into harmony. They chant only during lightning strikes, claiming God speaks in resonance. The Mistbinders, operating in the Scottish Highlands, this order interprets fog density as sacred scripture. They chart its ebb and flow like divine calligraphy. Each movement is recorded in ink made from fungal ink caps in rainwater. Their most sacred act is known as the Quiet Walk, a silent pilgrimage through unmarked bog paths, guided only by the curvature of cloud. The Spiral Church. Centered in what used to be coastal Chile, this faith builds mandalas out of detritus, placing them on rooftops before they are swept away. Their belief is that entropy is the breath of a vast atmospheric intelligence, what they call Varea, the waking cyclone. They accept death as a form of ascension through vapor. Psychologists call it reactive spiritualism, a coping mechanism for climate trauma. But I think it's something more. The faiths are spreading in tandem with the shifting geomagnetic anomalies. Each spiritual cluster corresponds with a zone of electromagnetic interference where ELF and VLF band distortion occurs naturally. It's as if belief is blooming in tandem with planetary resonance, as if thought is being guided by the rain itself. There are unconfirmed reports, still classed as fringe, of synchronous conversions, where isolated populations speak similar prayers, draw similar glyphs, despite no contact or shared language. Rain is not only shaping ecosystems, it is terraforming minds. I've spoken with former colleagues who've abandoned science altogether. One, a solar physicist from Prague, now lives in a mountaintop hut and records water droplet patterns, claiming the rain encodes stellar symphonies. Another, a mathematician, insists he receives prime number sequences while meditating beneath storm gutters. These aren't lunatics. These are brilliant, broken people trying to find order in saturation. For me, it's more complicated. I don't believe in rain gods or sky voices, but I do believe the human brain can be reprogrammed by environmental monotony. That endless stimuli of a single frequency induces recursive feedback. The rain is the most consistent signal Earth has ever known. If something wanted to imprint a new belief system onto a global species, it wouldn't use terror, it would use pattern, it would use rain. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 24, 2043. The silence didn't last. For nearly a month, the infrasound dropped out of the atmosphere. A stillness beneath the rain, subtle but vast, like the ocean forgetting to pulse. But this morning at 03:12 UTC, the hum came back. And it brought something with it. It's not identical. That's the first thing I noticed. The old hum, first detected in Rainier 2, sat steady at 18.2 Hz, just below human hearing. This new signal sits closer to 17.5, and it's not constant. It pulses, modulates, it breathes. I was on my second shift in the comms bay when the anomaly hit. The room is soundproofed, but the pressure change was unmistakable. The walls didn't shake, but the air did. Every metal surface seemed to tighten slightly, like a shared exhale. I watched as 3 different spectrometers blinked into sync. Same frequency, same harmonics. Every one of our geoacoustic sensors lit up simultaneously. We checked for local interference, seismic, tectonic, atmospheric, nothing. This wasn't coming from below. It was coming from above, from the ionosphere, from somewhere between the clouds and the stars. The team thinks it's a weather echo. I don't. I've been feeding the signal into our spectral deconvolution array. It's not random. There are nested intervals, a form of natural binary. The pulse widths occur in a perfect Fibonacci sequence over a 128-second cycle. That's not weather, that's architecture. I ran a cross-correlation with past ELF data. The new hum overlays perfectly with certain extinct whale vocalizations, not in pitch, but in structure. Song logic, memory-bound repetition. It's not trying to be heard, it's trying to remind. I'm not the only one hearing it. The Borealis complex has begun issuing tinnitus meds to staff, even those not exposed to the raw signal. People report phantom harmonics in their sleep, vibrations in their teeth, their bones. One technician said he woke up humming it in his dreams. Another claims her daughter, who hasn't spoken since the rains began whispering rhythmic phrases in time with the pulses. Outside this base, across the cloud cities and coastal bunkers, reports are growing. Radios pick up subtle rhythms buried beneath white noise. Rain collectors buzz with harmonic feedback. Even aurora domes are showing standing wave anomalies, light patterns matching the hum's wave structure, glowing briefly, then fading as if in acknowledgement. The planetary resonance profile has shifted. Our atmosphere is now conductive in a way we've never observed. The magnetosphere, still weakened, may be acting less like a shield and more like an amplifier, bouncing this low-frequency signal across hemispheres. If this is natural, it's unprecedented. If it's not, then something is speaking through the atmosphere itself. There's a working hypothesis I've kept private, one I'm hesitant to even say aloud. What if this hum isn't from Earth? What if it's a response? In the early years of solar probe development, we theorized about interstellar communication protocols. Low bandwidth, long duration signals sent not as information, but as presence, a heartbeat, a loop, not to deliver data, but to establish that something was listening. This hum, it feels like that. Not a message, not a warning, but a return signal. Something heard the rain, and now it's replying. I've set up a private recorder. I'm going to spend the next several nights immersed in the signal, mapping its internal structure, listening for variation. If it begins to change, I'll know it's not a loop. If it begins to learn, we'll have to redefine everything. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, June 27, 2043. I've never liked calling water a resource. It was always something more, an archive, a translator, something alive. But now, after 10 years of global rainfall and what we're finding in the precipitation records, I think water is remembering us. Rain is falling faster than we can measure. But the real story is in the droplets themselves, not their quantity, but their quality. For the last 6 months, I've been part of a blind isotopic study comparing rainfall samples from across Earth's 3 major saturation zones: the equatorial rain belt, the temperate mist basins, and the polar hydropulse zones. We were expecting basic chemical shifts, variations in pH, trace pollutants, maybe some ionized radiation signatures. What we found was structure. Each sample carried micro-variations in hydrogen bonding angles that weren't random. The bonds clustered in specific rotational states, too organized to be thermal. Using ultrafast laser spectroscopy, we mapped these shifts at picosecond intervals. The result? Temporal clusters, repeating bond patterns that mirrored audio waveforms, specifically human speech patterns. They weren't words, they weren't even sounds, but they were shapes, patterns that mirrored the rhythm, frequency, and beat of whispered phrases. When converted to sonograms, some of them formed familiar arcs, others resembled brainwave signals, particularly theta and delta ranges associated with dreaming and memory consolidation. This was beyond chemistry. This was recording. A colleague of mine, Dr. Amini in Zurich, took it further. She chilled the water to near freezing and passed low-frequency magnetic pulses through the samples. The droplets began refracting light in fractal spirals. Internal structures emerged like crystalline glyphs suspended in a gel. She swore one looked like a fingerprint, another like a child's face. We thought it was pareidolia. We thought we were seeing meaning in chaos. But the rain kept repeating. Each new storm delivered similar echoes, bonded clusters recurring with clockwork consistency, as though the water was being updated, like a planet-wide memory card rewriting itself with each descent. And here's where it gets stranger. Some of the waveform echoes match audio logs, historical recordings stored in the Borealis archives, not in full fidelity, but in rhythm, pitch contour, and envelope dynamics. The hum, the prayers, even one of my own early journal entries, transcribed not in voice, but in bonding frequency clusters. I was recorded, not by a mic, by the atmosphere. So what is this? A byproduct of human activity? Acoustic pollution embedded in the troposphere? Or something far older? Some fringe theorists, now less fringe, are proposing the hydromnemic hypothesis, the idea that water is a naturally receptive medium for storing vibrational impressions, that each droplet, when crystallized in specific magnetic conditions, can retain memory traces, that the rain is not just passive transport, but biological media, a planetary-scale nervous system. We found clusters in rainfall from places no one has lived for decades, abandoned zones beneath ocean rise, dead cities long since drowned. And still, the water carries structured echoes. In some, faint modulated signals resemble voices, music, or even mechanical ticks, like typewriters or film reels. If it's true, if Earth's hydrological cycle now holds a cumulative echo of life before the deluge, it could mean 1. The rain is preserving our extinction. 2. Something is reading it. Or 3. Something is using it to write us. I've begun preserving my own voice, not just in these logs, but in vapor-sealed isotope chambers. I want to know if, when condensed, my words come back. Slightly altered, amplified, responded to. Because lately the rain outside my window falls in pulses, taps, beats, like Morse. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 1st, 2043. The sky stopped. That's not a metaphor. It wasn't poetic or symbolic. It was mechanical. On the morning of June 30th, 2043, at 04:02 Coordinated Universal Time, Earth's upper tropospheric circulation came to a halt. For 6 hours, nothing moved. We've spent decades tracking jet streams, those high-altitude rivers of wind that steer weather, moderate climate, and connect hemispheres. They've always wobbled, shifted, stuttered, but they've never stopped. Until yesterday. Our station's Doppler LiDAR arrays picked up the first anomaly just before dawn. The upper-level shear patterns began to flatten. Normally, at that altitude, we expect 60 to 180 kilometers per hour of wind flow, but the numbers dropped to zero. Zero. Not even microdrift. The atmosphere froze in place like a held breath, globally. I confirmed with other stations, Cloud City relays, surface bunker radar, even the last few operational satellites. It wasn't a regional glitch. It was planetary. The cloud bands held their shapes. Cyclonic systems stopped spiraling. Even the polar vortex locked in like a lens click. Earth had entered an inversion event the likes of which we've never seen. And then, things appeared. Not new objects, not meteors, structures, shapes within the clouds. Without motion, the veil thinned. It was like pressing pause on a rolling fog and realizing it had texture all along. Geometric strata emerged. Concentric waveforms, lattice folds, and what I can only describe as circuit-like patterns running across the sky. They weren't optical illusions. They had structure, depth, and they matched no known meteorological formation. I photographed one, an octagonal bloom of cloud layered in perfect symmetry, each layer pulsing faintly with iridescent shimmer. It hovered, unmoving, above the Arctic basin for nearly 40 minutes before dissolving into vapor when the winds resumed. Here's what haunts me. These patterns weren't formed when the wind stopped. They were already there, carried, masked, distorted by the turbulence. The rain had been hiding them, like data embedded in static, like glyphs hidden in cloth that only show when soaked and stretched. I cross-referenced the pattern shapes with known phenomena, wave interference grids, Lichtenberg fractals, cymatics. They bore closest resemblance to plasmonic resonance signatures, the kind you see in nanostructured materials designed to manipulate light at sub-visible wavelengths. In plain terms, these were skyborne circuits, cloud-borne architecture. This raised a terrifying possibility. What if Earth's atmosphere isn't just reacting to the rain? What if it's been rewired? Since the event, our EM readings have shifted. The Schumann resonance, normally steady at 7.83 Hz, spiked to 9.26 Hz during the stillness, then dropped back abruptly. The ionosphere's reflection profile changed subtly, creating longer ELF band reverberations. That's not random weather. That's response behavior. The hum also changed again, briefly harmonizing with the inversion field, then vanishing completely when the jet streams resumed. It's as if something was waiting for silence, and when it got it looked back. There's an unspoken theory among my team now. No one wants to voice it directly, but the whispers are there. We were supposed to move. That's what kept us safe. Maybe the motion was the cage. I've begun building a personal archive of inversion signatures, recordings, photographs, field sketches, all sealed in analog media. I don't know if digital systems will hold their shape if this continues. If this was just the first inversion, there may be more, longer, deeper, intentional, and if the clouds stop again, what will they show us next? Recorded Audio Journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 5, 2043. Rain falls, rivers rise, oceans swell, but we never expected pressure to climb from below. We thought we understood the interior of this planet. We didn't. And now, the core is flooding. We received the transmission at Yo 247 this morning, encrypted sonar telemetry from Bathyscape Relay Station Theta 9, located 180 kilometers off the mid-Atlantic ridge. The data was impossible. Oceanic pressure had spiked by 21% in less than 12 hours. Subsea floor seismic reflections showed inverted density gradients, as if water was pushing upward through stone. And worst of all, a sound, low, rhythmic, hollow. We ran the audio through our deep echo translator. It wasn't tectonic, it wasn't geothermal, it was pulsed, timed, structured, like breathing. We've long assumed Earth's core was a solid metal sphere, spinning within a molten outer layer. But under these readings, the model collapses. Instead of echoes bouncing off dense iron nickel, we're seeing absorptions. Our sonar pulses are not returning. They're being swallowed. One of our geophysicists, Anaya, ran the data against a rogue framework, the variable core hypothesis. It's been dismissed for decades. It posits that Earth's inner structure isn't constant, but adaptive, responsive to external electromagnetic fields. And in extreme magnetic fluctuation, it could liquefy. What if it already has? There's another layer to this. In 2040, A joint deep-sea drilling project reached unprecedented depths in the Puerto Rico Trench before collapsing due to rising basalt gas pressure. At the time, we assumed it was mantle degassing, but now I've reviewed those logs. The gas was saturated with hydrogen and tritium in ratios too structured to be natural, not radioactive decay, not volcanic venting, something filtered. We now believe there is a massive subsurface reservoir beneath the oceanic crust, a hydrosphere within the Earth, possibly layered, possibly ancient. And now, due to the planetary rain cycle, it's activating. This brings us to the theory I've avoided until now, a hypothesis that has haunted fringe science for over a century, the hollow Earth model. I don't mean a habitable interior with sunlit skies and mammoths. I mean something structured, layered, and now pressurized. There are rumors, quiet, classified, of sonar arrays in the Pacific returning maps not of chaos, but of geometry, concentric voids, spherical hollows, passage corridors. An artificial resonance profile was detected last week near the Mariana Seamount chain, a repeating harmonic consistent with cavity acoustics. We may be standing not on a planet, but within a vessel. Let me be clear, I don't know what's inside, but here's what we've measured. The gravitational field has subtly weakened, a 0.02% drop since rain year 5. Core convection patterns are decohering. Magnetometer readings show chaotic flux reversals. Global sea levels continue to rise, not just from above, but from beneath. The crust is no longer the barrier we thought it was. Earth's interior is opening, and it's not filled with fire, it's filled with water, or something that acts like water, but transmits pressure, information, and possibly thought. One last detail. When we triangulated the pulsed sonar echoes, we mapped them against the locations of rainbelt spirals and inversion sky patterns. They match, perfectly. The pulses are timed with the return of the hum. They're coordinated. Something is rising from the deep, not to reach the surface, to rewrite it. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 9th, 2043. It started with a window, condensation streaks forming shapes too perfect to be chance. At first I thought it was pareidolia, my brain seeing meaning in randomness, but then it showed up on the next window, and the one after that. Identical patterns, precise, layered, and then the same symbols appeared in the field outside, and in the static of our radio. The storm wasn't just falling anymore, it was writing. Rain always leaves traces, tiny streaks, mineral blooms, thin films on glass. But last week, in Sector 3 of the Borealis Habitat Dome, those traces began forming patterns. At first, loops, spirals, mirrored lines, then recursive notations, radial symmetries. Now, full symbolic clusters, etched not by hand, but by humidity and impact dispersion. Like each drop carried a tiny instruction, we captured them using oblique light and high frame rate time-lapse. The patterns emerged over seconds, but held their form for hours before evaporating. I mapped 5 iterations. The 5th was nearly identical to an ancient symbol recorded at Göbekli Tepe, a trident spiral intersecting a wave arc. But we'd never exposed the dome to historical material. It wasn't contamination. It was communication. The phenomena escalated. Our exterior crop terraces, used for low-yield root fungus, began showing drainage marks in spiral formations. Not erosion, not runoff. Glyphs. 18 meters wide. Every one composed of perfect angles, nested within Fibonacci arcs. No human hand could have laid them in this terrain. Then came the electronics. Signal drift in our local weather radar began producing waveform bleed, phantom images in the spectrograms. At first, we assumed it was internal noise, but the shapes matched the rain glyphs, and then they started showing up before the rainfall events, as if the signal preceded the storm. We consulted linguists, cryptographers, even AI predictive models. No existing language matched, but there were features, recursion, anchor characters, rhythmic grouping that suggested structure, purpose. It wasn't a language for reading, it was a language for activating. There's a term from early data architecture, hydroencoding, the idea that fluid behavior, pressure, temperature, turbulence can carry data at extremely high densities. It was theoretical, obsolete, but the rain seems to be doing exactly that. Not just falling, but imprinting. Every droplet may carry data, not just isotopic variation or chemical memory, but structured sequences designed to trigger. Trigger what? Behavior? Thought? Planetary function? Satellite imagery from Cloud City Arc 11 shows similar glyphs appearing in storm spirals, lightning blooming in geometric bursts, rain bands shifting into hexagonal arcs, and they're synchronized globally. From Norway to Patagonia to eastern Mongolia, identical symbols have been recorded in fog. We are not dealing with local weather anymore. We're dealing with a distributed interface. The planet is speaking in storm. One last detail, perhaps the most disturbing. Yesterday, at 0319, our data historian Marya came to me shaking. She'd been cataloging historical barometric glyphs, ancient weather scrolls from 14th century Tibet, and found a diagram matching one of the rain-etched symbols exactly. The monks called it the air that remembers, a prayer meant to awaken the memory in sky water. We thought it was poetic metaphor. We were wrong. This isn't just a glyph storm. It's a primer, a sequence, a set of keys. And now that the atmosphere is still enough, the message is coming through. We don't know how long we have before the full script is written, or what it will unlock. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 14th, 2043. We used to say the forest had memory, but now we know it wasn't the trees. It was what lived below them, the fungi, the threads, the network. They've been listening this whole time, and now they're beginning to answer. The fungal bloom event in Central Europe last month was written off as another symptom of the rain. Aerated soils, infinite moisture, runaway biomass. But when a borehole research team at the old CERN perimeter cut into the substratum, they found something else. Not rot, not randomness, design. At 6.3 meters below surface, they uncovered a network of mycelium arranged in spiraling helixes, layered, deliberate, repeating. Not in growth rings, in memory sectors. Using bioacoustic sensors and magnetic trace mapping, we've confirmed that this fungal web isn't just distributing nutrients, it's storing environmental inputs. Rainfall pH, electromagnetic field variation, sound frequencies, even voice patterns from nearby human activity. The mycelium is acting like a biological archive, and it's indexed. This isn't metaphor. I reviewed the acoustic sample logs myself. Buried in the hyphae, the researchers captured pulses at consistent data intervals, mirroring early tape storage encoding, silence, tone, silence, break. When played through our infrasound translator, the pulses produce a sonic spiral, a waveform so precise that it forms a golden ratio spiral in time. The data isn't random, it's structured by intention. We've dubbed the discovery the Spiral Library. Preliminary estimates suggest it spans at least 200 kilometers beneath what was once the Black Forest Basin. And it's not the only one. Matching fungal frequency signatures have been detected beneath the Pacific Northwest, the Tibetan Plateau, the submerged ruins near southern Japan, and deep glacial melt zones in Patagonia. In all cases, the mycelium shows identical spiral logic. Each pulse cycle contains up to 144 unique glyph echoes, matching atmospheric glyphs previously observed during the inversion event. Chapter 9. The rain writes from above, the fungi record below. There's an emerging hypothesis now, whispered among xenobotanists and fringe information theorists. The fungal layer isn't just reacting, it's a storage system, a natural hard drive distributed across Earth's crust. And the rain is synchronizing it. The implications are staggering. We've long known fungi can transmit electrochemical signals over distance, but this is different. These signals include waveform entrainment, patterned rhythms, and cross-structure redundancy. One researcher called it organic RAID storage. Another said, it's not just saving data, it's editing it. The spiral library also seems to retain trauma. Sites near historical disasters, war zones, mass floods, nuclear spill zones show accelerated pulse activity, as if the mycelium replays high-energy events on loop. One node beneath Old Kiev replicates a 1986 atmospheric signature every 9.4 days. Another in the Amazon mimics the scream harmonics of deforested zones. Some believe the fungi are curating these memories. Others believe they're teaching them forward, passing them to the next bloom, to the rain, to us. And here's where it gets stranger. At several sites, we've uncovered fungal glyphs, tiny tendrils curling into precise spirals that match atmospheric storm symbols from Chapter 11. These weren't just grown randomly. They were shaped, formed. The glyphs are alive, and they're encoded in both directions, sky and soil. The Earth is a resonant feedback loop, and fungi are its memory cells. What else do they hold? What do they remember that we've forgotten? What happens when they reach capacity? Or worse, when they begin to overwrite? Recorded Audio Journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 18, 2043. Not every sound is a message. Sometimes it's just pressure through a pipe, wind across a broken door. But sometimes, even when the mind knows better, you hear something that sounds like a voice. In the floods, in the runoff, in the storm surge that cracks open an empty city, and you wonder, how much of it is the weather? And how much of it is us? Let me start with facts. Over the last 3 months, urban sensor arrays around the globe have been picking up aural anomalies, mid-band acoustic modulations buried in storm surge telemetry. They occur in narrow pulses, usually during high overflow events, and almost always in abandoned or partially submerged areas. In 9 out of 17 cases, these pulses, when slowed and filtered, contain what resembles human vocal formants, not full speech, not words, but phonemes, breath shapes, hints of consonants. It's likely turbulence, hydraulic echoes bouncing off submerged architecture, mimicking voice patterns. We've seen it before: resonance chambers in ancient tombs, parabolic interference in cathedrals. Water is a great mimic, but this is happening everywhere. In what remains of Helsinki's lower quarters, a hydrophone recorded a looped sequence that repeated for 9 minutes during a flash surge. The soundscape, when spectrally decomposed, showed something remarkable: a waveform with near-identical spacing to human speech cadence, 1.4 seconds between peaks. The pattern was so consistent, one of our interns fed it into a speech synthesizer. It produced a voice, not coherent, but undeniably human-shaped, like someone trapped behind a waterfall trying to be heard. It shook me more than I expected, not because I believed it was someone real, but because I realized we all want to be found, even in the flood, especially then. Let me ground this. We're not talking about magic or coded messages from fungi or the atmosphere. What we're hearing now is the voice of collapse. The city drains are oversaturated, aquifers are rupturing, overflow channels are no longer controlled. They're reactive, flooding without warning and draining into dead infrastructure. And when water meets old technology, phones, radios, broken data centers, it plays them. It turns them into strange, stuttering instruments, music boxes filled with human fragments. We've begun calling these events audio ghosts. But they're not ghosts. They're us, replayed through the systems we left behind. I visited the remnants of an outpost in southern Greenland 2 weeks ago. No one had lived there since rain year 6. The buildings were flooded, algae climbing the windows, and still, when the wind shifted, I heard it. A faint chime, a burst of static, and then, barely audible, a child's laugh. It was an old surveillance drone, half submerged in a ditch, solar cell barely alive, replaying stored files every time it gained charge. But in that moment, it felt like the planet itself was mourning. These last few months, we've begun archiving these storm voices. We don't classify them as data anymore. We call them echo events, not because they carry meaning, but because they remind us Civilization is not erased by catastrophe. It is eroded, one memory at a time, and sometimes those memories speak back. The storms are getting worse, not mythically, not symbolically, just worse. Overflow is happening in dry zones now. Rain shadows have vanished. The jet stream hasn't restarted its full rotation since the inversion week. Floodplains have become permanent, and everywhere. The runoff carries our debris. Clocks, radios, toys, broken phones that still try to call towers that no longer stand. And if you stand in the right place, in the middle of a drowned parking garage, under 5 stories of storm surge, you just might hear the last sound of a world that once worked. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 22, 2043. Today, the rain stopped. Not for long, not everywhere, but enough. Enough to see shadow, enough to see sky. I never thought I'd record this entry, but for 17 minutes and 41 seconds, the sky above Greenland was clear. It began with static, not the digital kind, atmospheric, silence, a subtle shift in the tone of the air, like the planet pausing mid-sentence. I was in the central greenhouse corridor when it happened. At first I thought the mist filters had failed. The light changed, just slightly, a paler gray. Then a thin beam, like a scalpel of gold, cut through the condensation dome and struck the floor in front of me, and I froze. Because it wasn't artificial light, it wasn't LED or filtered UV, it was sunlight. I stepped into it. My skin reacted immediately. Warmth, not imagined but real. I held out my palm. The light flickered through my fingers. I cried. Every monitor in the station lit up at once. Solar sensors overloaded with data we hadn't seen in years. Direct irradiance, shortwave return, full spectrum exposure. We hadn't seen a solar profile like that since rain year 1. The rain hadn't vanished. It still hung on the horizon. But for the first time in over a decade, the sky above opened like a wound healing from the inside out. A patch of blue. A sliver. But blue. The message traveled fast. Across the Borealis relay, across the cloud cities, across underground networks of survivors. People ran to rooftops, climbed towers, opened shelters just to look. Some held mirrors to the sky, hoping to catch just a flash. Others stripped off their coats, wanting the light to touch their bones. The children, they looked confused. They squinted and asked why the light hurt their eyes. They'd never seen it before. The sky to them had always been wet, always gray. One little boy from Dome 4 said, "It feels like we left the cave." But it didn't last. 17 minutes. Then the clouds collapsed back into themselves, like a breath being held too long, exhaled in fear. The rain returned. Not stronger, just normal. Familiar. The light was gone. But the effect was irreversible. Our station morale shifted. People are smiling. They're cooking again, not just warming rations, but making food. Singing. Engineers are recalibrating the solar towers. Gardeners are testing seed strains that need direct light. For the first time in years, we're seeing plans being drawn. The survival mindset, careful, clinical, unfeeling, is cracking. People are starting to talk about something we haven't used in over a decade. After. We don't know what caused the break. Maybe a natural fluctuation in cloud formation, a temporary reassertion of upper atmosphere winds, or maybe the storm system is tiring. The rain is still here. But now we know it can stop, and that has changed everything. Even in science, hope is a variable. And today, for the first time in 3,426 days, it entered the equation again. Recorded audio journal. Dr. Halden Marrin, Borealis Atmospheric Research Complex, July 25, 2043. There was a moment this morning, not a scientific breakthrough, not a broadcast, just a moment. The rain was light, a mist, really. The wind had returned, subtle but real, and from the east, across the tundra, I heard it. A bird, just one, but enough. They've always said birds were the first to vanish, silent canaries for a planet gone sideways. When the skies closed and the electromagnetic fields faltered, they stopped navigating, stopped migrating, stopped singing. But this morning, at 0511, outside our main corridor, perched on the bent arm of a broken weather antenna, a bird opened its mouth and sang. Not mimicry, not wind, music. We don't know where it came from. The tundra beyond Borealis is still drenched, but the frost has pulled back just slightly. Moss is blooming again, and for the first time in years, seeds planted near the dome's perimeter have sprouted without artificial heat. Not many, just the hardy ones. But they're real, and that matters. The soil isn't the same. It's acidic, fatigued, scattered with fungal decay, but it's still alive. We've begun mixing in salt reduction moss and sponge root hybrids. They're slow, but they hold water well. Real roots, in real dirt. It's enough to begin again. There's a new rhythm in the base. We don't check the rain gauges first thing anymore. We check the wind. We listen. Even the children have changed. The ones who've never seen a sunrise now draw their own versions, awkward golden arches over puddled worlds. Some are naming the birds after invented words. One calls them sky paths. Another calls them dawners. And maybe that's right. The flood maps haven't changed. The cities are still gone. The rain belt remains impassable. But people are returning to the edges, to the ridges, to the places where land and water still negotiate instead of consume. Some communities have begun building terraced towns, raised walkways over sponge farms, reed walls, mist catchers on every rooftop. There are no dry streets, but there are paths. And that's a start. Cloud cities are beginning to share seed stock again. One sent us a box yesterday, wrapped in wax cloth, labeled only, "For the ground." We opened it like a sacred thing. I walked the outer perimeter today. I stopped at the hill where the old satellite dish collapsed 2 years ago. The metal has rusted down to a skeletal ring, overgrown with moss. Inside it, someone planted wildflowers. Or maybe they just found them again. Purple, yellow, blooming sideways into the mist. I stood there for a long time, thinking. The world didn't end. It softened. It forgot how to be what it was. And now, maybe, it's remembering something simpler. We'll keep recording. We'll keep tending. But from this point forward, the story is no longer about the rain. It's about what grows beneath it.